Can you guys see that okay?
What page is that, Nick? I'm looking for it in the digital book.
This is the slides. And so in the digital book, I don't know what page that would be on,
Okay.
but we will
All
get that. So this is separate from it.
Because I can't really see it. I'm on my phone. The Giant's Path, Journey, Grief. Okay.
Yep. And then I don't know if maybe you can turn sideways on your phone or come back to the recording, because we'll have the full screen on the recording for you as well.
Okay.
When we look at what is not in our lives, what is not, what isn't there, the journey of grief is all about the heaviness, the heavier emotions, feeling your emotions, feeling your feelings, all of them in every degree. Rumi says that joy is concealed in grief. How many of you believe that? That joy is concealed in grief. It doesn't feel like that, because when you look at grief, the grief comes from gravare, which means weighty, heavy, heaviness. And when we speak of grief in the Giant's Journeys, we're talking about depression, we're talking about anxiety, we're talking about anger, we're talking about grief, sadness, right? The heavier emotions, the emotions we don't like to feel. You know, you think of things that have happened in your life. You think about current events in your life, things that are going on right now, and they feel heavy, some of those things. And often we don't want to feel that. So we find something to do. We get busy, we numb out. You know, we find something else to do. When we start thinking about our inner world and who we are, and if that feels heavy, then we'll find some way to not feel that. Does that make sense? We'll move forward. We'll do something to keep ourselves out of that. But the only cure for grief is to grieve it. Can you hear that? The only cure for it is to grieve it. The only way to really heal your deeper emotions is to feel them. Because if we don't do that, it's like getting a cut and then neglecting it. Does that make sense? So you cut your arm and then you neglected it. That could go very badly, right? That's where we get traumas. That's where we get lasting, triggers and things that really affect us, where we think we're not worthy. We think we're undeserving, unvaluable. We start to label ourselves and really believe that that's true because of what we feel, because those feelings are so intense. They make us believe that what we're thinking is true. And when you think about emotions always follow your thoughts. And truthfully, it can't be just your thoughts, because you have 50,000 thoughts a day. It's got to be more than that. It's got to be your judgments and your justifications. So your emotions are going to follow your judgments of yourself and your situation and others, right? We have judgments of others. And if we look at judgment is an appraisal of what's going on over there, what we think the value is in relation to who we think we are. So if somebody comes along and says, hey, you're a piece of crap, and you believe it, well, then you're going to feel the emotions of that, right? And then you're going to act accordingly in that order. So the thoughts, emotions, actions, always in that order. So what we're striving to do here is create room for all of your heavier emotions. Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, when she talked about grief, she gave voice finally to people that were going through heavy emotions. They knew what they were going through, but they didn't have language for it. So she talked about denial. The first thing is they get into denying what is. They feel angry. They start bargaining, and then they feel depression, and then they move toward acceptance. Okay. When you look at Susan Anderson's work, she talks about abandonment. We have a shattering of our world. We withdraw, we internalize, we rage, and then we lift. How many of you love depression or sadness?
I used to.
Used to love the feeling?
Used to.
Okay.
I don't now. I used to all my life. I thought, yeah. I said that, didn't I? I guess I must have, but I don't anymore. So much.
Okay. Our goal here is, a lot of people don't like to feel the heavy emotions. They don't like to feel sadness. They don't like to feel anxiety or fear. They don't like to feel, grief. They don't like to feel depression. Now, for us to feel sadness, let's talk about that real quick, and then we'll move into depression. But grief occurs when we have attachment to something. We become bonded to something. We become bonded to a dream or vision. We become bonded to another person. We become bonded to an ideal, an attachment to that ideal. We become bonded to a way of being. Like if you've been a certain way for your life, do you think you might experience a possibility of grief if you changed? Could that also get in the way of you changing? Could you be afraid of losing yourself if you were somebody different from who you are today? Might that create some grief, some fear? So for grief to occur, there's got to be attachment. Without attachment, we don't grieve things. There's plenty of things that happen in the world today that we didn't grieve, that were pretty heavy stuff. And we didn't grieve it because we weren't attached to it. It didn't impact us. And time and space, right? Andrew Huberman and Mary Frances O'Connor, some of the top researchers on grief, talk about the need for time, space, and attachment, that all of those components are there when somebody's grieving, because you're no longer able to access them in time or space or the thing. It doesn't have to be a person. It could be a thing. It could be a dream or an ideal. We had somebody in one of our trainings this week where she grieved being assertive with her family members. She told them what she wanted and they ignored it. And it caused grief within her because she was attached to this idea that it should go some other way, and it didn't. And it created some sadness within her. So we become really attached to, it should go this way. It should be like this. It should look like this, right? Depression, if we look at depression, I think is useful. And here's why. It causes you to resign from what you're working on. It causes you to pull back your energy from what you're working on. It causes you to reflect and really think about what's happening. It has you see reality exactly as it is. So you see reality as it is, not as you delude it to be, because we're happiest in our delusions. Then you could have a reverence and a respect for that reality and what's happening, and you could re-engage in a new way. But a lot of people get stuck right here in the resignation, reflection, and reality. It becomes too much. So they numb out and they don't get a chance to really re-engage, so that the resilience is affected. Does that make sense? If we saw depression as something that causes us to pull our energy back, I can't tell you how many times we created things from a depressed state, because it's like what we did didn't work. We feel that frustration, that sadness, and that failure, so to speak. And then that failure is what caused us to look for a solution and re-engage in a new way. But if we hadn't felt that, we would have kept doing the old thing, trying to get it to change, right? It really has you reflect on your efforts, your energy, so that you can pull it back and redirect it in a new way, a new, more powerful way. Lisa Feldman Barrett, she says this: numerous experiments showed that people feel depressed when they fail to live up to their own ideals. Think about this in your own life. When do you feel sadness? When you're not living up to who you think you should be, right? When do you feel anxiety? When you feel like you're falling short of the standards set by others, the ideals that you think others have. And here's the curious paradox: the stress that kills or cripples most of the population comes from people being too hard on themselves when they don't live up to their own imaginings about how other people think they should behave. Can you hear that? We think we know what they're thinking. We measure ourselves against what we think they're thinking. So still the struggle comes right back here into us. And then we feel that suffering right here. Now, pain is a part of life. We feel pain in life. Suffering is when we decide that we shouldn't be doing that. It should be something else. And we turn it into, it should be this, and I'm not there, so I'm feeling suffering, not pain. Pain is a normal thing. The brain processes emotional pain the way it would physical pain. If you cut your arm, the brain wouldn't know the difference between that and sadness. And we avoid pain. We run from it. We try not to face it. We numb out to it. And sometimes when we really look at ourselves and who we are in our worlds, we feel pain. We feel suffering. We feel sadness. And we judge ourselves really harshly over who we think we are. We're really hard on ourselves more than anybody else. And then we're hard on ourselves over what we think others are thinking. And then we seek their approval. We want their approval anyway. Even though we don't necessarily want their approval, we still go after it. Does that make sense? And then we judge ourselves accordingly. So The delta, or the gap between who you are and who you think you should be, is where the suffering comes in. Because you are where you are. We're not saying it as a resignation. You just simply are where you are. So this is going to bring us to the journey of acceptance. Many of us resist where we're at. We don't want to be where we're at. We don't want the situation to be what it is. We don't want to be where we are in the world, so to speak. We fight it. You know, I use the analogy of the bear in the field. You're driving down the road, you see the bear in the field, and you think, I don't want that bear in the field. And so you run out and you jump the fence, you start fighting the bear in the field, right? And the bear wins. It's going to kick your, it's tougher than you are, right? So acceptance is allowing the bear to be in the field. Acceptance of one's life has nothing to do with resignation. It doesn't mean running away from the struggle. On the contrary, it means accepting it as it comes. Okay. So you're not running away from your life. You're just acknowledging and receiving it as it is. This is my life. This is who I am in my life right now. But can you hear that? Not a resignation. Doesn't mean I'm here permanently. It's just simply where I am. But we're not even okay with where we are. Acceptance means to take or receive willingly. To receive willingly, which includes you and your life as it is. Your life is what it is. You are who you are. Okay. Ianla says that acceptance doesn't mean agreement, nor does it mean we feel good about what we're facing. It means that we're willing to look for and embrace the lesson. It also indicates a willingness to grow through the experience. So we're looking for the lessons in it. What can we learn from where we are? What can we learn from who we are, who we think we are? Acceptance keeps pain from turning into suffering. See, if the first step in change is awareness, the second step in change is acceptance. It's acknowledging your life is where it is. John Patrick Morgan, who is a mentor of ours, says that there's two forms of acceptance: allowance and accommodation. Allowance is like going to the movie theater. You pay your ticket, you're there for 2 hours, you get your popcorn, you got to leave in 2 hours. You can't move in. Accommodation is it gets to have room and board. You got to adjust to it. It's like having a roommate. You're going to accommodate it, right? When it comes to our emotions and our thoughts, they're a part of who we are. They're not going away. We're going to have them there. Now, when the emotions show up, we can create allowance. There's also allowance for those emotions. They get to be there. They bought ticket to be there. There's a reason they're there, but they also have a time limit and a time frame. And so this quote here, the best way to escape from the past is not to avoid it or forget it, but to accept and forgive it. And one of my favorite definitions of forgiveness is to not cause additional harm. So don't cause yourself additional harm over what you're doing. Don't cause yourself additional harm over what you did. And if somebody else caused you additional harm, are you willing to absorb the costs? Because the suffering is happening within us. And maybe we're not talking about justice here, but we're talking about causing yourself additional harm over whatever's happening in your world. Does that make sense? There's nothing in this that says that justice can't be served. Nothing at all. But any harm that you're creating within yourself, any suffering that you're creating with the painful situation that you're inducing on yourself, that's what we're talking about. Let go of that. Can we get rid of that? Letting go isn't about having the courage to release the past. It's about having the wisdom to embrace the present. What this is doing is it's putting you into the present moment. We're not trying to deny the past. We're not trying to get rid of the past. We're trying to get ourselves right here, right now. Because this is where you get to transform, is right here, right now, not some future date, not the past. The past is what it is. Okay. It is what it is. It was what it was in every way. Maybe it wasn't ideal. Maybe it wasn't what you signed up for. But do you need to keep creating suffering around whatever it is? Can you fully feel your feelings? Glennon Doyle, she talks about in her book, when she was coming out, she was talking about how people told her that happiness was for feeling and everything else was for suffering or for stuffing. So the more she stuffed her emotions, the more booze and food she had to stuff in just to stay alive. And she has something on her mirror written that says, feel it all, right? So what we're trying to do here is in the journeys of grief and acceptance is feel all of our feelings, our heaviest emotions, not chase them away, acknowledge them, name them. The moment you name your emotions, it's like skeet shooting. I don't know if you guys have ever done that. It's like the naming of the emotion is shooting the gun. And then when it hits the skeet, it shatters it into pieces. And when you name your emotions, you recognize that's not who I am. That's what's happening inside of this body, that emotion. Then it separates it from you and it dissipates it like that. The moment you give it a name, it's a power that you have. And so when you can feel your feelings and say, oh, that's grief. I'm feeling grief. I'm feeling sadness. I forgive myself for judging myself as unworthy. I forgive myself for judging myself as incapable. I forgive myself for judging myself, because that's what we're doing. We're judging ourselves as something. We're feeling the feelings of it. And then we're causing ourselves additional harm over feeling those feelings. Can you hear that? And the goal here is to stop causing yourself additional harm. It's already hard enough. Life is a challenge. And to heap shame and guilt and all these other judgments and justifications on ourselves on top of that makes it even harder. Vicky, Tori, you don't have to explain yourself. Do you know what I mean?
Yes, I thank you. Yes. I mean, yes.
Does that make sense?
It does.
Yeah.
I don't know why I was feeling I had to defend what I was feeling.
I love it. I love that you did it. And I appreciate you doing that. What you did today I felt it was really serving. Did you all feel that too? Did that serve you in your own way? I'm going to hit pause on the recording here and we'll keep going for a minute.